Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the new webinar in this series with Engagement Factory. Today we're going to talk about sales as part of the customer experience and how you're going to make buying more easy. I'm your host. My name is Roland de Wit. I'm managing consultant at Engagement Factory. Been around for a year or so and spent around 2 decades in sales and marketing. So this topic today is really dear to my heart. I love to be hosting this session today with you. We've started this webinar series at the beginning of the calendar year, where we did a session on marketing transformation. We hosted 6 webinars in total, and they're all available to view for you still. Just go to webinars.engagementfactory.com and you will see the list of 6 webinars that we played, including their recording, so you can still have a look at them. Real valuable information, so if you have some time left, spend it there. And that also inspired us to host another webinar session, which we're currently running. So 2 weeks ago, we kicked off with Mark de Groot from Oracle, sharing his 6 trends on customer experience in 2018. And we're continuing today with sales as part of the customer experience, how to make buying easy. And then in 2 weeks' time, we'll talk about service, again, as part of the customer experience, and then diving into content and finalizing this series with 2 sessions on best practices, B2B as well as B2C. So we'll stay with you for the coming months on a bi-weekly basis here on Transformation Tuesday. So the agenda for today. I'm going to do a brief introduction, and then we're going to look at what's changing in buying behavior and how we should best align sales and marketing and keep adding value to our customers, because they're a vital piece in this entire discussion. And we'll have room for Q&A at the end, so save those for last, and then we'll get to them as well. So how do you get the most out of this webinar? At least stay tuned for the coming 45 minutes or so. Take some notes. We will have the presentation deck and recording for you available afterwards. If you have any questions, submit them in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. We have a few polls coming up, so I would appreciate if you participate in those. And of course, join the other webinars if you like this one. And for now, just sit back and get inspired. This webinar is brought to you by Engagement Factory. We are an agency that is currently active in 4 offices, soon to be 5, in the Nordics, in the Netherlands, in South Africa, soon Dubai, and then we have colleagues across EMEA and working for clients across the globe for everything which concerns to improve a better engagement. A lot of it around marketing, market automation, modern marketing, but also expanding that into customer experience. And what we see on a daily basis is really the challenges that it's more and more difficult to offer a well-integrated experience. But that's also what the clients are looking for. And it's partially caused because of the siloed systems and processes and people and data, which is making life of companies and sales and marketing people within companies very hard, but in the end also impacts our end customer. Because what we're still looking for is to send the right message to the right person at the right time via the right channel, because that is really what is driving the right type of engagement, what we're all looking for. So what we've done, if we build our customer experience building blocks, where we start from the left-hand side in marketing and then via sales take it into service. And there's 3 interesting companies that have joined forces. Together we formed SPARCX, an alliance around CX, where Engagement Factory focuses most on the marketing piece, BPI OnDemand takes care of the sales piece, and TKC Digital is our service expert. And today we'll have BPI OnDemand on the show, and in 2 weeks' time we'll have TKC share their vision as well. With having said that, I'm going to bring in our guest speaker for today, Fred Wilkinson, to share his vision on how we're going to adapt CX strategy to changing buyer behavior. Fred.
Roland, thank you, and it is an honor to be invited today on the Engagement Factory webinar. series to talk exactly as Roland has alluded to the real problem around trying to connect organizations and their various silos and departments, systems which have been designed for departments, through to the adapting behavior of people's customer experience. Next slide, Roland. On the next slide, it's just a very brief intro to myself. Like Roland, I've been around for a few decades now in terms of the sales and marketing experience, and gone through various different blue chip organizations. But really fascinating on my take is that Roland said the right people, the right processes, the right tools, and the right time. If you look back in 2008, buying a house is doing the right thing, but at the wrong time. Ultimately, the credit crisis hit, and it started to create new roles, especially I pick out within sales and sales operations, and the creation of roles such as sales effectiveness. If you look at the service side, you look at a real drive towards trying to make companies more and more efficient in serving their customers. And then finally, marketing, again, looking at the whole principles of the front office, marketing, sales, and service organizations, that the vendors all built systems for departments. So I'm in marketing, I'll go and buy some marketing systems. I'm in service, let me go and buy a contact center solution. I'm in sales, well, I need a pipeline tool. And, you know, I kind of give it a sort of round of applause to someone like Salesforce.com, who basically put a pipeline in the sky or in the cloud, whichever way you want to word it. But actually, did it help the end customer? The changing customer buyer behaviors today are so different to a company internally trying to make themselves more efficient. Does that actually benefit? And unfortunately, as I said, the vendors building systems for departments. So how do you start the process, and what are the demands on the customer? The customer wants to buy in an integrated fashion. Companies still today market, sell, and serve in a siloed fashion. So we'll talk about the benefits of aligning sales and marketing, and how do you begin that process? Delivering CRM ultimately, therefore, that drives value for the C in CRM and not internally focused. In their buying cycle, none of us know where they are in the buying cycle. We have no idea where our clients might be, whether B2C or B2B. Next slide, Roland, please. And again, what's fascinating is that we don't know where they are in the buying cycle. On the basis there is so much free data and so much free information around the world, Google search, social media, all of these channels to do research. And I believe that the number's even increasing on a yearly basis to 65% of the decision of buying something has happened before you engage with a salesperson. I was fascinated to hear that Tesla's buying and deposit provision for a new car was 85% bought without a test drive, which is incredible if you think about that change and shift in the behavior of a buyer towards a car or a vehicle. Next slide, Roland. So what influences buyers? I'm going to come to this on the next slide, but let me just go through a couple of points first before we go and open up the first poll, which will be great for you guys to have a go at on this webinar. So buyers want accessibility, and I'm going to expand that word. Buyers want convenience. Buyers want not to be loyal, they just want convenience. If a brand of supermarket was to open up next door to your house the following day, well, you'd probably move house, number one. But secondly, you wouldn't be so loyal to the previous supermarket that you shopped at before. So accessibility is key critical. What do your customers say? What's the proof around social media? And what are the initiatives that you're providing to your buyers that builds a top-class customer experience? Let me give you an example of one of those that's pretty manual. I was fortunate enough to go and stay at a 5-star hotel in London called the Savoy. And I walked up to the Savoy out of my taxi, and I had a bag with me. And ultimately, I walked through the revolving door. But I'd forgotten the fact that I'd given my bag to the doorman, who just briefly asked me for my surname to put on the ticket so that I could walk in without my bags. And suddenly this lady walks up to me in the reception once I've entered the building and says, "Mr. Wilkinson, welcome to the Savoy. Can I check you in?" And so it's just a simplistic integration of two departments sharing the same data, providing the better customer experience. And ultimately, if I could afford it, I would go back and stay at the Savoy one more time. Next slide, please. And I think, ultimately, we can see on the screen that you've got all of those channels and places to go to. I'm only picking just a few as an example. So let's jump into the poll. What I'd like to ask is very simply what you feel, what actually influences your buyers. So we'll take a second to allow you a moment to answer the question. Okay, we'll go for another 25 seconds, 30 seconds. So if you'd like to vote now, we're counting down. Thank you. Thank you very much. And there's the results. So very interestingly, it's all about proof points. It's about customer references. And website accessibility being the second place. The other pieces are really fascinating initiatives around advertising and social media. So really, really kind of interesting answers from the attendees today. But ultimately, what it tells me is that 67% is really down to other customers who've experienced a good experience and who reference is key critical to the success of making it easier to buy. Okay. Moving on to the to the next slide of the presentation. So if you can click through onto the building, I think it's really sort of something I want to be very open about without building the slide forever. It's very simple that that CRM, and I know it's obvious, it stands for customer relationship management, and everybody, including the vendors, forgot that for the last 20 to 25 years, trying to make themselves more efficient. It is definitely not a system. Way too many times do I see customer relationship management being given to the IT team to implement as a system. Looking at the fact that Salesforce, it's kind of, you need to add 500 different plugins to make it more than a pipeline tool. And then finally, it's also not a sales department or a marketing department or a service department's tool. It is all about what's been forgotten, which is the customer. And integrating into one single integrated shared data model where marketing, sales, service, e-commerce, social, the configuration, the pricing and the quoting, and ultimately the data that's shared around the business to the right people at the right time, at the right process, will ultimately win you more customers and make it a distinctly far superior and easy company to buy from. So moving on to the next piece. Picking out on service, which I'm delighted to announce that TKC Digital will be in 2 weeks' time, joining the next webinar session. But here's a stat: around 86% of consumers will just not come back. They will not. If you think about TripAdvisor on restaurants, if you get a really bad experience at a restaurant and service or food or something, the likelihood of you going back is just, as you can do the maths, 14%. It's a huge risk. And ultimately, therefore, focusing on the customer and not focusing on how you can make yourself more efficient, unless, of course, it improves the customer experience, that's really critical to your future and the expectations of your customers. Next slide. So where does it go wrong? And I think this is right, repeating and kind of solidifying everything that I've said to this point in mind, which is having no single view of the customer, not being able to see what are their past purchases. Did Fred come to this restaurant in the past? If he did, what wine did he order? Knowing that information about a customer is critical. Missed opportunities in the buying cycle are huge. You know, you're reliant on a sales maker in the sales organization deciding what to sell a customer when they're face to face, and you're not with them, and the sales manager or sales director can't be there with them at that time. So influencing and having recommendations and data provided at all of the steps throughout the process can really dramatically change the buying experience. And ultimately, lack of alignment between sales and marketing, but also the wider team as well. Service, legal maybe that requires some special terms, might be pricing that you need discounts for. All of these different departments must be glued together. Not completely, but the relevant data pieces must. Okay, next slide. So let's go into poll number 2 and understand where and how does your buyer journey fall short. Select one of the following: prospect data quality, leads left being behind, sales and marketing alignment, or lack of sales and marketing alignment. Select one of the following. Give you another 30 odd seconds to answer that poll. Thank you. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up there. Fascinating answers there in terms of the results. I think what it alludes to is 100% of the answer comes down to data. Prospect data quality is the amount of data that is available to be able to decipher and understand more and more about that prospect itself and understanding their business and how you can help them. And then leads being left behind, that's basically data that's not being able to go from one department to another, i.e. the difference between sales and marketing. So thank you for that. That's really interesting data, but ultimately, again, it's about integrating the departments together to better serve that customer and also better serve internally. So moving on to the last few slides, I just wanted to kind of critically go through what BPI is all about. So BPI, again, across EMEA, with also offices over in the United States for global coverage. And we've got consultants worldwide who are experts, as Roland highlighted, much more focused and experts towards the sales organization and how that integrates within the SPARCX alliance that we have. So SPARCX, spelled SPARCX, and actually .com is available if you wanted to go and have a look. But our principle and philosophy is business performance improvement on demand. That's what BPI stands for. It's about a strategic business approach and not just throwing in a piece of software and hoping that it does something to improve the customer experience. Moving on to the build slide, the first column is pretty simple. You know, let's be honest, it's all about people. Especially in the sales organization, you could implement the most beautiful CRM platform with reports that look beautiful. But if nobody's using it, then forget it. You've got to have executive support right at the highest level, and right down at the bottom level, involve the users in the project. Help them design the way that you're going to better align an integrated experience for your customers, and not how it's going to improve their lives. Because it will by default if they're getting customers into the process, which is the next column. Understand what journey mapping looks like. People before talked about process design, trying to improve and make the sales engine more efficient. But actually, if you conduct a process workshop, conduct that process always with an eye and an ear towards the customer's journey and the customer experience journey versus just the sales process. What I find fascinating is I had customers asking me so many times, how many days in the workshops does marketing need to be there? How many hours, and when should finance come in? When should HR maybe be there? When should sales, and when should... And my answer was crystal clear. Everybody in the organization has an effect on the process of selling. not the sales department, the process of selling. Marketing's involved, sales are involved, finance, HR, legal, pricing for finance again, and service, of course, when it comes to the post-service guide. You've got things like operational, so actually implementing whatever you or providing a supply chain, right through to finance itself in generating and collecting cash from a client. So think about that journey as a cross and break those silos down in the process. The next one is, once you've designed that process, is to drive much more access to the data that internal and external people want to want to be able to access during the middle column, their process. Drive adoption through incentives is one way, but let me give you an example. For sales, it's really easy. Salespeople generally want to do one of three things: get discount, book deals, get commission. If you have one of those processes inside the CRM platform, then ultimately adoption as a problem goes away. You're going to have people who want to use the tool, and then you can focus on the quality of the adoption and the quality of the generation of more data to improve the customer experience. Which leads me on to the final column, which I've already just said. It's data. Data, data, data. Someone told me the other day that data is the new oil, and I said, well, actually, that's not right. Data is even more powerful than oil. Fundamentally, you can only use oil once. The great thing about data and trying to put the sales organization, marketing organization, service in any single interaction with a customer is that that data collected at those interaction points can improve the personalization, the understanding, the getting to know your customer even better than before. The more times you use data and the more times you enrich that data, the more powerful it will become. Of course, used in the right way, professionally, in accordance to the new GDPR regulations coming out in May. But develop a master data strategy. Have that concept of all different departments and even external data that you can glean from various different sources. Put it all into one single place. CRM is the customer, not what billing and finance think is the customer, not what sales think is the customer, etc. It's about what the customer thinks the customer is and defining that 360 view. So we're coming towards the end of my piece, and there's just another slide or two just to kind of reiterate the points that we've talked about. We're talking about customer centricity. Everyone's used it in the past, but the credit crisis got in the way. We stopped thinking about customers and we started thinking about becoming more efficient. So start thinking about those customers again, connecting the right customers throughout all of their interactions, making marketing simplicity even better and more personalized by involving sales in the content strategy, by involving and having visibility across departments. Lead optimization is absolutely critical, as I said before, not sending that expensive sales maker to a lead that doesn't quite score the right sort of level. And also, if you were given 5 minutes to evaluate the whole of your pipeline right now, with maybe 40 or 50 parameters around the close date, around the probability of closing, the product mix, the decision maker level, the influencer level, the date of closure, the value of the deal, the complexity, all that sort of, it's almost impossible. And I'm delighted to be partnering with the SPARCX organization around some powerful artificial and adaptive intelligence that within a split second could properly rank your sales opportunities to get the focus and attention and the prioritization across 50 or so parameters within each. And it's some really cool stuff that's coming out in the marketplace that we can help you with if that's of interest, rather than leaving it to a sales maker who might have more emotions involved when it comes to deciding which opportunities to work on next. So aligning sales, marketing, and of course service as well in the interactions with your customer. So on the next slide, Roland, if you will, I will just really sort of leave you with the three key takeaways today. So customer centricity, we've heard about it and I'll not repeat it. Focus on the customer, not your efficiencies. The two will help each other, but start with the customer. AI is not will play, it plays a role today. There are tools that you can put on top of your pipeline, as I said on the previous slide, that can simply calculate within split seconds with no emotions attached based on some simple rules. And the machine learns itself based over time, the most likely sales makers and what their win rates might look like, and make recommendations towards the next actionable step. And again, it really helps drive adoption, because most sales makers just want to be told, where do I move next in the sales funnel? What should I do next? And if it's making recommendations, it might make their life easier. And then finally, aligning sales and marketing to really fix the cracks during that customer experience process, not losing leads that might fall into a dark hole, not losing the interactions that a sales maker has, looking at the process timing that a customer might be waiting for a proposal, or how to meet a tender deadline. All of these elements, I'm talking a little bit B2B there, but it gives you a flavor about how to align sales and marketing together to drive better performance and ultimately making it easier to buy. Roland, I think I'm passing back to yourself, unless I'm mistaken, but thank you so much for listening to us today. Roland, if you wanted to take the opportunity for Q&A. Thank you everyone so much for listening.
Yeah, thanks, Fred, very much for your contribution today. I think great story on what you have experienced in the past, and the way that it's moving into the future. So we're now going to open up for some questions. So if you have some, please submit them in the question box. I already have some for you, Fred. So the funny thing is, we're talking about that the customer is driving this new way of customer experience. On the other hand, a lot of your examples are, let's say, still inside out thinking of how we should improve our processes and alignment and data, etc. Is there a sort of tipping point where the customer finally becomes more important than the internal processes?
So that's a great analogy. I think you are right in the nature of some of the examples I'm giving, but I think it's the philosophy of the angle of which you're thinking. It's not trying to make my sales team more efficient and more effective, but it's arming them with the right data at the right time. We all hate when we go onto a call and they say, "Oh, I'll put you through to the specialist," and then you've got to repeat yourself again for a second time because the next sales maker in the process doesn't have the right data at their fingertips to be able to serve that customer. So it's more about the philosophy and the attitude that the defining factors on what tools and systems and processes need to be in place must be defined by the customer journey, which I said earlier on is to design the way you operate as an organization by running customer journey mapping sessions and how they would experience and their interactions and their requirements, not yours. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, maybe aligned to one of the questions that we received. Do you see specific business sectors that are already very advanced in this compared to others?
Yeah, I do. I see banking, interestingly, taking a step in the right direction. When you think about the experience of having to queue up as a customer at a branch at the weekend, and now today, if I'm talking about the UK, the most or the busiest branch of a bank in the UK is the 8:15 train from Reading to Paddington, because people are able to access it on their mobile app. So being able to going back to the convenience piece there, banks have really led the way there on convenience of being able to transact. And then the sales process is that there is push notifications coming through to recommend certain elements based on your profile. So I'm seeing them do some interesting stuff. I think the car industry is connecting people to their music better in cars because that's what people want. So it's blending together and also highlighting what we're talking about today, Roland, which is the alliance that we've created with Engagement Factory, TKC, and BPI, is that we believe that partnerships and having multiple organizations with multiple experts, BPI being the great experts in the sales process, Engagement Factory on the marketing experience, and obviously TKC on the service side, it's bringing together people who've done the job, who've experienced it from both sides, customer and being on the in role. So we understand those challenges. So if you think about the strength, is also sharing data with partners, going outside your organization when you're not an expert. That is a huge thing in the world today. One tiny example is DHL. Well, they don't make cars, right? But they can deliver a parcel to the back of an Audi on the basis of a code that will open the boot. So rather than you having to be at home waiting for your parcel, deliver it to your car, wherever that car may be.
Cool. I didn't know that example. And an interesting one that you talk about the financial services and banking, because that's one of the examples that Mark talked about two weeks ago on our previous one, where we're talking about the impact of artificial intelligence in marketing and sales, and where the human factor still plays a role. And he was also talking about, branches being shut down by banks, but then having these pop-up offices, for instance, within a Starbucks. Because if you're there waiting for your cup of coffee, you might want to take care of some financial business, or might have a question that you'd like to have answered. So this main point was, the human factor is still a vital piece in the entire journey. You just have to look where it makes most sense for the buyer to have that interaction. So if you can do it digitally, that's probably the easiest way to go. But at some point, you still want to have that human interaction as well. So which aligns with your idea. You have to look at the journey, do the customer journey mapping, and see where you can really add the most value. So the personal feeling that I always have with CRM is that it's been around for decades, and then sometimes it seems that it's really no one's best friend. And you might think differently because it's really your bread and butter. But most salespeople have never been a friend of CRM, nor customers, because they didn't see really that value coming from it. And you've talked about what went wrong in the past and also what should be changed. So in a couple of sentences, wrap up, how would you see that change in literally putting the CRM to work to, in the end, really deliver that better customer experience?
Well, I think, thank you, Roland. I think there's a small example I'd like to give you, actually, that goes a little bit left field again, which there's a very, very large office provider globally who most people probably know the name. And I was interestingly having a conversation with their vice president of sales, and I said, well, what is your sales strategy? And he flippantly answered to say, well, I really like the idea of firing the whole sales team. You can't persuade someone to buy an office if they don't need an office. So it's a reactive business as it is, and quite sort of B2C in its nature. And interestingly, the analogy he gave was, well, I want to get a GoPro and get 30 or 40 people roller skating around all of the real estate that we have worldwide, all of the spare and the free offices that we have and the facilities available. I want to put that online and have the ability to configure my office, to price it up, all of the different parameters and the add-ons and the recommendations like Amazon would, and then be able to transact and take a quotation. And if I needed to desperately, I can do a virtual tour. And really that was a very, very fascinating analogy given by what is predominantly quite a sales-led organization. And that sort of leads me into the factor of I think technologies have moved on so much that the reliance on sales makers is less and less per se to do some of those manual tasks. So if there's a lot more that can be done and automated within the system, that the client can just get what they want much, much faster and easier, and actually the human interaction is much more valuable, and that time spent face-to-face, if needs be, or on the telephone, is much more valuable because each party knows each other's data far, far better. then that buys you the convenience. It buys you the leveraging of technology. But I think it really goes back to one simple factor. Unless data is shared across the organization, I don't think that model or that concept is fundamentally possible unless you achieve that. And it doesn't need to be every piece of data. Shouldn't be scared from this comment or statement. It should just be very simply the relevant pieces of data that's going to help you progress the customer experience.
Thank you. So one final question I received, you talked a bit about artificial intelligence or adaptive intelligence, I think you called it, and that there are cool things coming up. Is there one example that you can share how AI is powering the buying process?
So I guess, Roland, you guys at Engagement Factory, there's some immense things coming through the B2B marketing solution, which is very much adaptive segmentation. So the ability to, yes, decide on some demographic factors about your clients and where they might be in their buying cycle, but then also intertwine it with their with their behaviors and their learnings and maybe their previous purchases and likelihood of buying the next product along the line, and just automatically adapting that campaign from a marketing side towards those individuals based on their change of behaviors and previous experiences. So that's probably a very crude marketing example. And then we're leading in towards more of the sales examples that I was giving, where the assessment of a pipeline and really looking at an account and territory planning for a B2B organization, for example. I need to know, for that particular account, what type of sales maker do I need? Do I need a hunter? Do I need a farmer? And if it's just adapting based on the parameters within the system in milliseconds, you're not waiting years or till the end of the year to decide what territories and who should be where. You can adapt, and the system is adapting accordingly and aligning what the customer wants to the kind of behavior in the sales org. And then fundamentally, there's just a core set of recommendation engines that are providing uplifts in clients are about 30 to 40%, like within 2-3 weeks, based on some very simplistic learnings of, if you buy that, you buy that, and it's nothing new, which is what's frightening about it. It's just simple recommendation engine. And then the second piece is just recommending the next action. If you try and shift the top performer in the team or the bottom performer of the team, that's really hard work. You may get 1% more, but if you try and shift this huge parabola in the middle of the rest of the organization, try and shift them 1 or 2% to the plus side, purely by adding 1 or 2% over 100 sales makers, you're suddenly adding, you can get exponential in that growth. So we're seeing machine learning in the intelligence and adaptive intelligence, providing reporting and actionable insights immediately during the sales process, rather than a sales maker trying to make it up for themselves.
Okay, thank you. So we've been talking about, let's say, enabling customers to have a better customer journey. We're also talking about how to enable better sales. One thing that might be interesting for the audience as well is that we are also involved in the Sales Enablement Society, which is a global movement, I would say, to bring the sales enablement idea to a higher level. It started over in Washington, D.C., and then it's now spread across the globe. And we also have some local chapters, like in the UK, like in the Netherlands, and also across EMEA. So if you are, let's say, in my neighborhood in the Netherlands, then I'd like to point you on the event that we have going on May 24th in Amsterdam, starting at 4 p.m., where we'll be talking about a similar kind of topic, how we're going to move sales forward and what we could do to, let's say, try to drive some tech-driven guided buying. So where you can really put technology to hand to have a better customer experience and also drive better sales results. So if you want to learn more, have a look at sesociety.org. That's also where you can register for the event, which is free. And even as a gift, you get the brand new book of Tamara Schenk, who will be presenting there. And she offered to give everyone attending that free new book of hers around building a successful sales enablement function, which I think nicely ties into the topic that we're talking about today. Then coming up, as I said in the beginning, a number of new webinars. In 2 weeks' time, we're gonna zoom in on service as part of CX, where literally, once someone really becomes a customer, and after marketing and sales has done their job, what we really need to do to provide first-time right answers, and even provide answers for being asked at all, because that's really when you do a good job from let's say, a knowledge and a service perspective. Then on May 22, we're gonna have a look at content is king. And we'll have people from Showpad on the show to talk about how they help companies to do a better sales enablement job, and also how you can drive better conversations. And as I said, then in June, we'll have 2 sessions to cover best practices in B2B and in B2C. So I hope to see you there as well. Spread the word if you like this webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And for now, I thank you for your contribution, and I wish you all a very nice day. Thank you. Bye-bye. And thanks to Fred, of course.
Thank you, Roland.